And shalom to all my fellow brothers and sisters out there walking in Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, the one the world calls Jesus. This right here is first of all, is again me, Damian Power from YeshuaSavesAll.com. And I thank you all for joining in. I pray that this is a blessing to you. And I just want to point out that I know next week is what the world calls Thanksgiving. And I just want to point out, as you can see from this picture here, that this is one of many pagan harvest deities that are being worshipped on this day in other cultures, and there are many of them, and by many different names. But this one is a corn baby or corn doll, or whatever else they've dubbed it as, a corn dolly made of wheat, fabric, steel, and aluminum. So these are real, and this is my topic today about the world's Thanksgiving versus the true Thanksgiving. So again, thank you all for joining in for this broadcast of this week. And as I said, who are you giving thanks to on Thanksgiving? That's the title of this broadcast. Who are you giving thanks to on Thanksgiving? Is it Yahweh and His Son Yeshua, the Creator of heaven and earth, or is it something made of wood and stone, or wheat, corn? What is it? So with that, we'll get started with what I want to share with everybody. Now, the world has forsaken Yahweh's holy days, also known as Moedim in Hebrew, his appointed times, also known as Shabbats or Sabbaths, all of his holy days that are found in Leviticus chapter 23. But they have forsaken Yahweh's days to follow Satan's days, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Now, we know that Yahweh says in Hosea chapter 4:6 that my people perish for the lack of knowledge. So if you did not know, I pray that this is a blessing to you so that you do know, so that you do not perish for lack of knowledge, because we know that he's a jealous ale. And people, that's the singular form for what people say for God. He's a jealous ale. And he says, have no other Elohim, mighty ones before him. Yet the world is either doing this knowingly or unknowingly. He's a jealous Elohim, and he will punish, he says he will punish the third and fourth generations of those who hate him. So I want to make a distinction about what the world celebrates holidays that are not found in the Bible. You are rebelling against our Creator Yahweh. There's no other way to look at it. You are rebelling, meaning that you are walking away from Yahweh instead of walking with Yahweh. We're supposed to be walking with Him, towards Him. The closer we walk to Him, the closer He comes to us. But the world has forsaken everything from this huge misconception that's being taught in the church and my pastors. But anyway, I want to show the origin of Thanksgiving and how it evolves around the worship of pagan harvest deities, how this day was instituted by man and not Yahweh, and how these days are all knockoff Thanksgivings and not Yahweh's true Thanksgiving, which is called Sukkot, the Feast of Ingathering, the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles, which occurs at the end of October. We've already had that almost a month ago already. So these are all knockoffs. And as we know, Satan wants to mock everything that Yahweh does. Okay? He wants to mock everything that Yahweh does. So Yahweh has Shabbats and Sabbaths, and Satan has Sabbaths. He just takes the H off. So he always wants to mock. He wants to be like the Most High. But he never will be, and we know that. But unfortunately, the world has given him the impression that he can be given a day to where people can worship him, whether knowingly or unknowingly on these days. Satan has deceived the world again, except the world thinks that this holiday is more innocent than the other ones when it's just as bad as Halloween. So what false deity is Satan using this time? Acts chapter 19, verse 27. And not only is this trade of ours in danger of coming to rejection, but also that the temple of the great female mighty one, Artemis, whom all Asia and all the world worship, shall be regarded as worthless and her greatness diminished. Now, Paul was doing what he was supposed to be doing, where he was exposing the false pagan deities, but and saying that there's only one Elohim, the Elohim of Israel, okay? Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, okay? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the Elohim of Israel. And he was telling them that they were worshiping a pagan deity. Now I'll go a little further. Galatians chapter 4, verse 8. But then indeed, not knowing Elohim, you serve those which by nature are not mighty ones. Okay? So now notice how Paul in Acts chapter 19, verse 27, okay, there was a guy named Demetrios. He was a silversmith who built silver shrines for this pagan deity named Artemis. And the other craftsmen recognized it, so that all of Asia were worshiping a false deity. They knew this, but they were building a shrine, and that was a part of their job. That's how they were making money, by building this shrine. However, at the same time, they felt that she was still real. So uh, what happened is Satan has moved the true Thanksgiving, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, to a false one in November. Okay? To a false one in November. And this was exactly what was prophesied in Daniel 7:25. Now notice what I wanted to say is that from that scripture from Acts 19:27, it says Artemis, who all the world in Asia worship. All the world. So the whole world has been deceived by it, but I will get back to that in a minute. So the true Thanksgiving is the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. All right, that's Yahweh's true day. Now, Satan has moved it to a Thanksgiving a whole month later. Okay? Now, that right there fulfills what's spoken of in Daniel 7:25, where it says, and he shall speak words against the Most High, and it wears out the saints of the Most High, and it intends to change the appointed times and laws. Okay? Now, what appointed times and law is Satan changing or trying to change? Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1 through 2. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, the appointed times of Yahweh, which you are to proclaim as holy gatherings, my appointed times are these. And then Yahweh lists the seventh day Sabbath, which occurs every week, which the Sabbath is starting tonight, and and tomorrow night, Friday night sunset to Saturday night sunset. Okay, it's the Sabbath. And then he lists Passover, Feast on Unleavened Bread, Shavuot, known as Pentecost, Yom Teruah, known as Trumpets, Yom Kippur, known as Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which I'm explaining now, and the 8th-day Assembly. Now, 99% of the world has rejected these days for Satan days. Okay, now, wouldn't this qualify exactly what was spoken about in Daniel 7:25, where he intends to change the appointed times? He's done that because the world is not celebrating the holy days that Yahweh has told us to celebrate throughout our generations. Passover, that's been substituted for a pagan day of Easter. Thanksgiving, his Sukkot has been changed to Thanksgiving. You see what I'm saying? Everything has been twisted. His Sabbath has been changed to the first day of the week. So Satan has been successful, as Revelations 12:9 says, is that Satan has led the whole world astray. Revelations 12:9 says, and the great dragon was thrown out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was thrown to earth, and his messengers were thrown out with him, or people would know them as angels, were thrown out with him. Okay, now Artemis, who the whole world worships, okay, is being used by Satan, who leads the whole world astray. Do you see how I'm tying this in here? So, who is Artemis that the whole world worships? there's an article titled "The Cult of Artemis," and it says Artemis, great mother and divine huntress. She was a chief hunter of the gods, the gods, or the lowercase e Elohim of goddess of hunting and of wild animals, especially bears. Artemis was also the goddess of childbirth, of nature, and of the harvest. And of the harvest. Isn't that what Thanksgiving is a celebration of? Isn't that why Yahweh calls Sukkot and the Feast of Tabernacles the Feast of Ingathering, when you gather in the harvest throughout the year? You see? So Artemis is also of the pagan deity of nature and of the harvest. And remember, she is who the whole world in Asia worships. It is believed that she was the first of this carrying earth mother goddess, and later many religious changes became the virgin huntress of myth. So we see that this deity of the harvest, which is Thanksgiving, is also known as the mother goddess, which would link her to Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 18, which says the children are gathering wood, the dads are lighting the fire, and the women are kneading their dough to make cakes for the queen of the heavens and to pour out drink offerings to other mighty ones to provoke me. So she's known as the mother goddess, and that ties her right along with what I just read in Jeremiah 7:18, the queen of the heavens, which was used to provoke Yahweh to anger. So there's no difference now. Okay? As believers and followers of our Messiah, Yeshua, we are commanded to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Ingathering, which is the true Thanksgiving. This feast and celebration was commanded by Yahweh in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 33, which says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of the 7th month shall be a feast of tabernacles for 7 days unto Yahweh." And then Exodus chapter 23, verse 16, Yahweh says, "And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors which thou hast sown in thy field, and the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field." So your fruits in the harvest, you gathered them out of the field. You see, he calls it the Feast of Ingathering. He also called it the Feast of Harvest, because his day is the true Thanksgiving, the true harvest. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 13, Yahweh says, "Thou shalt observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days after you have gathered in the produce of your threshing floor and of your wine." So he is the one that's supposed to get the worship and the praise and the thanks for Thanksgiving, not some pagan harvest deities, a corn baby and an Artemis. That's not the way it's supposed to go. But the world has been deceived and given them the esteem and not Yahweh. So the question is, why do we need two Thanksgivings? Okay? Why do we need two Thanksgivings as followers of Yeshua after he has already commanded us to do Feast of Tabernacles, which was a month ago? This widely celebrated holiday of Thanksgiving is overlooked because it seems innocent enough on the surface, but underneath this day is filled with a lot of darkness, just like the other pagan days of Halloween and New Year's Eve and Xmas and all those other days. So with that, I'm going to give some facts about Thanksgiving. As I said multiple times already, Yahweh commanded all believers, because if you watch my broadcast, I'd say multiple times that we are all one body in the Messiah. Once you accept Yeshua as the Messiah, as your Savior, as the Son of Yahweh, you will become grafted in with the native born, the Ger, G-E-R, will become one. There is no difference between native born and non-native born anymore. So we are all to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, not this one that's coming up next week. This Thanksgiving coming up next week is not found in Scripture. Australians have a corn mother doll, which I showed on the onset, also known as the corn baby, which is fashioned from a sheaf of grain cut in the field and the kern baby, which is the last of the standing corn of the biggest and ripest ears of corn to be found in the field. The spirit dwells among the corn and also requires sacrifices. It requires child sacrifices. Now, isn't there another deity in the Bible that requires sacrifices known as Moloch, who the children of Israel would hand their babies over to with the brazen bull, the fire burning under his hands? They would put their children on his hands to burn the children up for economic prosperity or for fame or fortune, whatever the case may be. So this current baby requires the same thing. Now notice how I say that it's found in the field and that there's a spirit that dwells among this current baby. I'm going to show you another picture of this. This is what this is. They are praising and worshiping, giving thanks to this pagan deity, this current baby. She's fashioned of corn and the last standing of the wheat. And you can see she has on top of her head, she has a dress. And look at that. Families all around are giving praise. That is sad. That is sad. Something that you have fashioned with your own hands. And then you're going to give child sacrifices to this pagan deity. Wow. She did not give you the food, the wheat, the corn, and everything that you're eating throughout the year. It was Yahweh. It was Yahweh who gave the rains from the Shamayim from the heavens, not this pagan deity. But as you can see, the dads are bringing in the fire. The women are kneading the dough to bake cakes for the Queen of Heaven. There you go. They're all getting together to do this. Now, the Kern baby, there's an article called Tales from the Kern Baby. And this is what it says in this article. Till recent years, a rather common form of the revelry of Thanksgiving, which have ever taken place at the ingathering of the harvest. So look at that. They're using saying the ingathering of the harvest. Now, didn't Yahweh say that Sukkot and the Feast of Tabernacles is also the Feast of Ingathering? Look at what they're doing. Was the Kern baby. Like I said, they're using the same terminology that Yahweh used in Exodus 23:16 and Leviticus 23. One of the customs of Ceres. Now, Ceres, I'm going to get on her in a minute. Ceres. It had many local variations. It was observed in the northern part of Northumberland at the close of the reaping, not the ingathering. Immediately the sickle was laid down and the last sheaf set on the end. The men shouted that they had got the kern. Then a curious image was produced, an image dressed in white, which I just showed you, and a white frock with colored ribbons and crowned with corn ears stuck on a pole and held aloft by the strongest man of the party while the rest circled around it, as I just showed you. Subsequently, it was taken to the barn, set on high, and the merry makers fell to on the harvest supper. So that's when they went and had their Thanksgiving dinner while this pagan deity was sitting on high as if it was an Elohim, and it is not. The Romans dedicated their Thanksgiving to the pagan deity called Ceres, Ceres, and they called it Cecilia. And that's where we get the name cereal from. Do you get it? A pagan deity named Ceres. And then out of Ceres, you get cereal. And what is cereal made out of? Grain, wheat, corn. They're giving thanks to a pagan deity. You see where all this is deriving from? In England, they would set a harvest queen and decorate her with grain of the fields and fruit of the trees. She was then paraded through the streets on white horses. The Greeks honored Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. How is she the goddess of agriculture? Yahweh is the only one who brings the rain. He's the one that gives the sun. Okay, he's the only one that can make any plants grow, along with his son Yeshua. It can't be any of these pagan deities, but people are worshiping them as such. Outside of the pagan goddesses receiving credit for the harvest and being worshipped, Thanksgiving is also a day decreed by a man and not the Elohim of Israel. Governor Bradford in 1621 decreed Thanksgiving as a day to give thanks for the harvest and of other blessings of the past year. What? How does he have the authority to do such? Abraham Lincoln in 1863 made Thanksgiving a national holiday to praise, and I'm going to say God, because he cannot be the Elohim of Israel that they're giving thanks to, by observing and set apart the last Thursday of November as an annual festival of thanks for mercies of the closing out of the year. So again, this day was instituted by human beings. Set apart, remember it says that he set apart the last Thursday. Set apart literally means holy. Everything about Yahweh and Yeshua is set apart. Nothing about these pagan celebrations are set apart or holy at all. That's another problem. Indians were moved off of their homeland and thrown into reservation camps. Infants were taken from their mothers and killed. It was a sweet victory for William Bradford and the Pilgrims, and they gave thanks to their God for it. Now remember, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4 says, "And whom the mighty one of this age, which is Satan, has blinded the minds of the unbelieving of the good news of the esteem of the Messiah, who is the likeness of Elohim, does not shine on them." So Satan is the God or Elohim of this world. So which God are they thanking for their harvest or their Thanksgiving here? After stealing the land of the Indians by deception and murder, they celebrated it with a feast of Thanksgiving. Millions of Indians were murdered, just like millions of Jews, Yehudim, who were murdered and put into concentration camps. The difference is that we know that it's wrong to have a feast for Holocaust. So what makes the massacre of Thanksgiving of the Indians any different? You are celebrating having a feast of the slaughter of Indians. Okay, so if the pagan portion of all the harvest deities that I've given does not dissuade you, then think about the innocent slaughter of the Native Americans on that day. The Indians call that day, the world calls Thanksgiving, the day of mourning. In other words, the meal that you enjoy on that day is actually celebrating the death and suffering of Native Americans while they weep and have bad memories of what took place on that day. They were already here. Like I said, would anybody have a huge feast for the Holocaust Thanksgiving? No. We know what the Jews endured under Hitler. So what makes this feast any different? And it is my opinion that the Native Americans mourn on this day, as I've already said it, and that their souls are crying out to Elohim because their innocent blood was shed on this day. This is what happened when Cain killed Abel, and Elohim came to Cain in Genesis chapter 4, verse 8 through 12. He says, Yahweh says, where is Abel, your brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now this goes a little further. If you read the book of Enoch, which was removed from scripture, it talks about the souls of the dead. And Enoch was shown the secrets of heaven, Shamayim, and of the pit, the place of torture, right? And he was just given a vision of it all. And during this, Elohim showed him through the messenger Raphael the same account about Cain and Abel. And this is in chapter 22, verse 4 through 10. And it reads, this is Enoch speaking, or Hanok. I saw the spirit of a dead man, and his voice went out to heaven and made petitions. And I asked Raphael the messenger, or angel, or Malach in Hebrew, who was with me, and I said to him, this spirit which petitions, whose voice goes up and petitions to the heaven, And he answered me, saying, This is the spirit which went out from Abel, whom his brother Cain slew. And he makes his suit against him until his offspring is destroyed from the face of the earth, and his offspring are annihilated from among the children of men. And then I asked, regarding all the hollow places, why is one separated from the other? And he answered me and said, These three have been made that the spirits of the dead might be separated. Divisions have been made for the spirits of the righteous, in which there is bright spring of water, and one for sinners when they die and are buried in the earth, and the judgment has not been executed on them in their lifetime. So as we can see, the spirits of some of the Native Americans are crying out and making petitions to Elohim, just as Abel did against Cain, and Elohim hears those petitions in the heavens. They are dead to us, but we can't see them, but their spirits are crying out from the ground. As Yahweh said, your brother Abel's blood cried to me from the ground. Remember that Yahweh scattered his people to the four corners of the earth. Therefore, his people are of all nationalities. As I said, we are all one, including some Native Americans. Some of them do believe in Yahweh. Some of them do believe in Yeshua. So when you celebrate this day, you are recreating a pagan ritual that was horrific for the Indians. Colossians chapter 2, verse 8 says, See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophies, which depends on the tradition of men and the basic principles of this world rather than of the Messiah. You are taking principles of this world and holding them at a higher standard than of the Messiah, Yeshua. Yeshua died for us. He died for all, so that no one should no longer live for themselves, but to live for him who died for them and rose again. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 15. It's not about any of us or celebrating days that don't belong to the Elohim of Israel. We got to get it together, my fellow brothers and sisters. Wake up. Yahweh tells us bluntly in Amos chapter 5, verse 21, I despise your feast days, and I will not smell in your solemn assemblies. He doesn't recognize Thanksgiving or Xmas or Easter. He despises these feast days, and he says he will not smell in your solemn assemblies. He doesn't care for them. He despises them. Paul understood this in Galatians chapter 4, verse 7 through 9, saying, So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, also an heir of Elohim, through Mashiach, which is the Messiah, the anointed one, Yeshua. But then, indeed, not knowing Elohim, you serve those which by nature are not mighty ones. But now, after you have known Elohim, or rather are known by Elohim, how do you turn again to the weak and poor elementary matters to which you want to be enslaved again? You closely observe days and months and seasons and years. Now I'm going to explain that in just a minute. He also goes on in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, and says, You know that you were Gentiles, led astray to dumb idols, even as you might be led. So once again, once you come to know the true Elohim of Israel, you follow Yeshua, and you say you've given your life to him, how do you go backwards and continue into pagan worship to be enslaved by the chains of Satan again? You are supposed to be made new. You're supposed to become a new creature when you're born again in Yeshua. Okay, so therefore, you were a Gentile. A Gentile is a non-believer or a heathen. Once you become joined in with the Messiah, once you know him, you become a citizen of Israel. Okay, so that's why Paul said you were a Gentile, a pagan or a heathen. But now that you know the truth and you have become a citizen of Israel, how do you go back to pagan worship and pagan practices which you were supposed to have left behind when you didn't know Yahweh? Okay, you're supposed to follow Elohim and his commands, his holy days, his Sabbaths, his appointed times in Leviticus 23. However, believers turn to elementary things of this world and closely observe days, months, seasons, and years, as Paul mentioned, which belong to Satan's days and not Yahweh's days. People say, oh yeah, I can't wait. The holidays are upon us. We get to celebrate Halloween and Thanksgiving and Xmas. Yeah, you closely observe those days and seasons for his pagan days. You're supposed to be closely observing the days of Yahweh, which is why he said in Amos 5:21 again, I despise your feast days. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6 through 12. And these became examples for us, so that we should not lust after evil, as those indeed lusted. And do not become idolaters as some of them, as it has been written. The people sat down to eat and to drink, and stood up to play. Neither should we commit whoring, spiritual idolatry, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 fell. Neither let us try Messiah, as some of them also tried, and were destroyed by serpents. Neither grumble, as some of them also grumbled, and were destroyed by the destroyer. And also these came upon them as an example, and they were written as a warning to us, to whom the ends of the ages have come, so that he who thinks he stands, let him take heed lest he fall. Notice how Paul says that they committed whoring, which is sexual immorality or spiritual idolatry, and 23,000 fell in one day. This is what he was speaking about in Numbers chapter 25, when Israel joined with pagan deities. And it reads, Numbers chapter 25, verse 1 through 4. And Israel dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to whore with daughters of Moab, and they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones. And the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. Thus Israel was joined to Baal, Peor, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel. And Yahweh said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, each one of you slay his men who were joined to Baal. And we know that Baal is Nimrod, which is found in Genesis chapter 10, verse 8. His son is in Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 14. And he's the same one that's worshipped on all these pagan days, along with the Queen of Heaven. Okay, so when you put your Xmas tree in your house, that's who you're worshiping. And that's who the children of Israel joined themselves to in Numbers 25, which caused Yahweh's anger to burn. And he told Moses to hang them. And not only that, Yahweh sent a plague to destroy them. 24,000 men fell from what happened right there. Okay? So, celebrating these pagan days is not for Yahweh, no matter how you disguise it, by changing the name to a harvest festival or whatever it is that you want to change it to disguise the name of Thanksgiving. It's still worship of false deities and deities that did not make one grain of wheat or corn or anything grow. They didn't make any rain fall from the heavens for you. And as I also said before, the slaughter of Indians. This should be given to Yahweh and Yeshua alone for the food that has been provided for you. Now notice how Yahweh told Moses to hang those people who join in with this demon. So that means that when you are celebrating these pagan days that don't belong to Yahweh, you are hanging yourself in the spiritual realm and committing a spiritual death by joining yourself to Satan on these days. It all ties back to what I read from Paul. These are a warning. Paul said that these are a warning for us not to follow their examples of what they did. Yet the world refuses to follow Yeshua and the truth. Okay, Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. As I say so much, when he said that he's the way, the truth, and the life, all he did was sum up that he's the Torah. Psalms 119:1, Psalms 142, Proverbs 13:14. He summed up that he is the Torah. Fellow brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up. And this is what Yeshua told Paul on his mission. Acts chapter 26, verse 18. To open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light, and the authority of Satan to Elohim, in order for them to receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who are kadosh, sanctified by belief in me. Now, notice how Yeshua said to turn them away from the authority of Satan. So, when you celebrate these days that are not belonging to Yahweh and Yeshua, you have given your authority over to Satan for him to rule over your life. Yeshua came to break that chain of Satan, said that you are no longer bound by the law of sin and death, being a slave to sin and his ways. We are to walk in the Spirit and be free in the Spirit. Because when you walk in the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the righteousness of the Torah is being completed in us. Okay? And sets us free so that we are free in the Messiah, that we can live and not die, not to suffer the eternal punishment that is coming for Satan and his angels and his messengers. We're not going to be able to bear that wrath. Yeshua took that wrath for us. Okay? For as 1 John chapter 4, verse 9 says, not that we love Yahweh, but that Yahweh loved us, that he sent his only son to die for us so that we may live. It's up to us, and we have a free choice. We have a choice, and we have a free gift given through the Messiah. But it's time to wake up and break the chains of Satan and not let him have the authority over your life. Who are you going to choose? Yeshua talked about the voice. He says, his sheep hear his voice, and they will by no means follow the voice of a stranger. Satan is that stranger. Okay? So, as always, let us stand up and fight for the Elohim of Israel in truth. And please share this with anybody who needs to hear it, because it's an important message. Okay? Share this with everybody who needs to hear it. So again, thank you all for joining in. May our Father Yahweh, Barak, bless you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. And again, thank you all for joining in. I pray that it's been a blessing to you. Hallelujah.